It was back in the fall of 2018, I think, when me and my old friend Caleb decided to take a long weekend and get lost in the Monongahela National Forest up in West Virginia. We'd both been working too hard, me at the mill, him driving trucks cross-state, and we needed to breathe something that wasn't exhaust or sawdust. Nothing fancy, just throw some gear in my old Jeep, drive to the pavement thinned out, and hike a loop trail we'd found on an outdated Forest Service map. The thing was called the Cranberry Glades Loop, supposed to be 8 or 9 miles, moderate, with wooden blazes every mile or so to keep folks on track. We figured we'd start mid-morning, be back to the pull-off by dusk, cook some steaks over a fire, and sleep under the stars. Simple as that. We found the pull-off easy enough, a gravel patch big enough for 3 or 4 vehicles, ours the only one there. The air was sharp that October day, the kind that bites your lungs just enough to make you feel alive. Leaves were turning but hadn't peaked yet, mostly golds and muted reds drifting down slow whenever the breeze stirred. We shouldered our packs, locked the Jeep, and stepped onto the trailhead. There was a little sign, half-rotted, saying Cranberry Glades, 4.5 miles, with an arrow pointing into the trees. Felt good, felt right. The first mile or so was exactly what we wanted. The path was wide, soft with pine needles and fallen leaves that crunched under our boots. Rhododendrons crowded the sides, but hadn't swallowed the trail yet. We talked about nothing important, work, women we'd messed things up with, whether the Steelers had a shot that year. Every now and then we'd pass one of those wooden markers the map promised. Square posts about waist high, Forest Service logo burned into the top, a white blaze painted below. We hit the first one maybe 20 minutes in, tapped it like it was home base in some kid's game, and kept walking. By the second hour, the trail had narrowed some, but nothing alarming. The rhododendrons closed in tighter, their waxy leaves brushing our sleeves and packs whenever we turned. The canopy got thicker too, old hemlocks and spruce mixing with the hardwoods, so the light came down in patches, like someone was flicking a flashlight on and off overhead. We figured we'd pass the second marker without noticing. Sometimes they're set back a little from the path. No worry, we had the map, a compass, plenty of daylight. But mile 3 came and went, and we never saw another post. Caleb pulled the map out first, unfolding it against a boulder while I drank from my canteen. The paper showed markers clear as day, every mile on the dot. We should have been standing right beside number 3. Nothing around us but trees and undergrowth. We backtracked a quarter mile, eyes sharp for that white blaze. Found nothing. Not a post knocked over, not a splintered stump, just empty woods where the map swore one ought to be. Caleb laughed it off at first, said maybe the rangers quit maintaining this section, budget cuts or whatever. I nodded, but something cold had settled in my gut. We turned around again and kept walking. The forest changed after that, slow enough you almost didn't notice until it had already happened. The birds quit singing, even the squirrels stopped their chattering. No wind moved the branches overhead, yet every few minutes a leaf would drift down alone, turning lazy in the still air. The trail narrowed more, forcing a single file in places. Rhododendron tunnels closed behind us like green jaws, and still no marker. Around what we guessed was early afternoon, hard to tell with the light so filtered. We decided to backtrack all the way to the first post, get our bearings solid, then push on fresh. We knew we'd passed it, we'd both touched the damn thing. So we turned, followed our own boot prints in the soft earth. They were clear enough, side by side where the path allowed, heel digs where we'd clumbed little rises. We walked for what felt like an hour. No post. I stopped first. Caleb kept going a dozen steps before he realized I wasn't beside him. He turned, face pale under the stubble. "We should have hit it by now," he said, voice low, like he didn't want the trees to hear. I pulled the compass from my pocket, the old brass one my granddad gave me when I was 12. The needle swung slow, then faster, spinning full circles without ever settling. Caleb checked his phone. No signal, of course, but the built-in compass app did the same thing, whirling like a ceiling fan. We stood there a long minute, listening to nothing. Absolute quiet, the kind you only get deep in the mountains when something's wrong. Then Caleb forced a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Guess we're turned around pretty good," he said. "Let's just keep the sun on our left shoulder and we'll hit the road eventually." I nodded because what else could we do? We walked till the light started failing. The trail, if you could still call it that, had become little more than a deer path winding between trunks. Every now and then we'd cross our own tracks from earlier, looping somehow without us noticing. My legs burned, pack felt heavier with every step. Caleb stopped talking altogether. Dusk comes quick in those hollows. 1 minute there's gray light filtering through, the next it's full dark under the trees. That's when we heard the footsteps. They started off to our right, maybe 30 yards out in the brush. Steady pace, same as ours. Crunch of leaves, snap of a twig now and then. Not hurried, not sneaking, just matching us, stride for stride. Caleb whispered, "Bear." I shook my head. Bears don't walk upright for miles, and whatever this was kept perfect rhythm with our boots. We stopped, the steps stopped. We started again, faster, they started again, same distance. We
called out, first calm, then louder. "Hey, you lost too? Forest Service?" Nothing answered, but our own voices bouncing back dull off the trunks. The steps kept coming alongside, never closer, never farther, like someone walking an invisible parallel trail through the rhododendrons. We pushed on to the ground, opened up a little, a flat spot maybe 20 feet across, ringed by hemlocks. No water nearby, but it was the best we were going to find. We dropped packs, hands shaking, and built a small fire quick as we could. The footsteps circled once, wide, then settled somewhere out in the dark. We sat back to back, fire between us and whatever was out there, feeding it every stick we could reach without leaving the light. All night, those steps moved around us, slow circuits, pausing now and then like the walker was listening. Sometimes they'd stop for 10, 15 minutes, and we'd dare to hope it was gone. Then a single crunch, deliberate, and the pacing would start again. We didn't sleep, couldn't. Every time the fire burned low, the steps seemed to edge closer, until we'd throw on more wood and the circle widened again. Caleb whispered once near dawn, "You think it's a person?" I didn't answer. Truth was, I didn't know what I thought anymore. The sky went from black to ash gray without us noticing the change. The steps stopped sometime before first light. We waited till we could see shapes beyond the firing, then kicked dirt over the coals and started walking. Didn't talk about which way. We just followed our own boot prints from the night before, back the way we'd come into the clearing. The track stayed steady for a long while, then veered sharp downhill through laurel so thick we had to crawl in places. Hours later, couldn't say how many, we broke out onto Dart Forest Road. Not the pull-off where we'd parked, but a road all the same. My Jeep sat there, nose pointing downhill, key still in my pocket like I'd never left it. No tracks around the tires, no dew on the hood different from the surrounding grass. Just waiting. We drove out in silence. Didn't stop till we hit the little store outside Elkins. Bought coffee with hands that still trembled. Never did find that first marker again. I've been back to the Monongahela a few times since. Different trails, always crowded ones with fresh blazes and plenty of people. But I still dream about those footsteps sometimes, keeping perfect pace in the dark. And every time I pass an old pull-off with a half-hidden trailhead, I keep driving. Because whatever walks those forgotten paths alongside you doesn't seem to mind if you find your way out once. I just don't aim to test whether it minds twice.
It was the summer of 2022, one of those stretches where the heat just sits on you like a wet blanket, even up in the mountains. I've been on the road for a week already, heading nowhere in particular after my daddy passed. Driving the back routes through Tennessee and North Carolina, sleeping in the truck when I got tired, trying to outrun the quiet that had settled in the house back home. The Great Smoky Mountains were calling me that day, but I didn't want the crowds on the main park roads, all the RVs and tour buses crawling along like ants. So I took an old Forest Service road I'd spotted on the map, nothing but a faded green line winding off into the national forest, promising solitude. The pavement gave out quick, turning to gravel that pinged against the undercarriage of my pickup. I rolled the windows down anyway. The air smelled like pine sap and wet earth after a morning shower. Drove maybe 10 miles in before I saw the pull-off. Just a wide spot scraped out of the bank. No sign, no marker, barely room to turn around. A faint path led off into the trees, overgrown but still there, like folks used it once in a while. My legs were stiff from hours behind the wheel, and the thought of stretching them in that cool shade was too tempting to pass up. I grabbed my pack, a bottle of water, and the ham sandwich I'd made that morning at a gas station in Gatlinburg. Left the phone in the truck, no signal out here anyway, and started walking. The trail was easy at first, soft dirt packed down by deer more than people. Rhododendrons arched overhead in places, turning it into green tunnels where the light came down speckled and dim. I walked slow, breathing deep, letting the quiet wash over me, no hurry. Maybe 2 miles in, the path dipped into a little hollow where the trees got older, big poplars and oaks that had been standing since before the park was a park. That's where I found it, a massive oak, trunk wider than I could reach around, hollowed out by age or lightning long ago. The opening was tall enough to walk into without ducking, dark inside like a cave mouth, roots sprawling out across the ground like gnarled fingers clutching the earth. I stepped inside just to see. The air was cooler in there, still, with that rich smell of rot and damp bark. Sunlight slanted through the opening behind me, lighting up dust motes drifting slow. Felt like a little room nature had carved out special. I leaned against the inner wall, pulled my sandwich from the pack, and sat on a root that curved up like a bench. Took a bite, listened to the forest breathing around me. A woodpecker hammered somewhere far off, a squirrel scolded from a branch. Peaceful. The kind of peaceful I hadn't felt since Daddy's funeral. Then I heard the murmur. It was low at first, barely more than a vibration in the wood against my back. I thought it was wind moving through the hollow trunk, or maybe water trickling deep inside the roots. But it grew, shaped itself into overlapping voices, soft, distant, like people talking in the next room with the door cracked.
I stopped chewing, sandwich halfway to my mouth. Listened harder. And then, clear as anything, my name drifted out of that darkness deeper in the tree. My full name, the one only family ever used. Said slow, pleading almost, like someone calling me home from playing too long after dark. My skin prickled. I stood up fast, stepped out into the light, heart already thudding. Looked around the hollow, nothing but trees and shadows. No one, no tracks but mine leading in. Told myself it was echo, imagination, anything rational. Finished the sandwich outside the trunk, leaning against the rough bark instead of inside. But the quiet felt heavier now. Curiosity's a stubborn thing. After a minute I went back in, telling myself I'd prove it was nothing. The murmurs had stopped. I waited. Nothing. Then, because I couldn't leave it alone, I pressed my ear to the inner wall, where the wood was smooth and dark with age. The voices came back, clearer this time. Not loud, never loud, but intimate, like someone speaking right into my ear from the other side. Fragments of old conversations. My mama's voice first, the way she sounded the week before the cancer took her. "You eat, yeah, honey? You're getting too thin." Exact tone, that little rasp from years of smoking she never quite quit. Then Daddy, younger, laughing on the porch swing. "Boy, you couldn't hit water if you fell out of a boat." A fight I'd had with my ex-wife 5 years ago, her saying, "You always shut down when it gets hard." Word for word, like I was hearing the argument again in real time. Every voice perfect, every pause, every sigh. I jerked away like the wood had burned me. My breath came short, ragged. Stepped backward and tripped over one of those sprawling roots, went down hard on my backside in the leaves. For a second I just sat there, staring at the dark opening, waiting for a face to appear, for something to step out. Nothing did, just the hollow staring back. I got up and walked away fast, not running yet, but close. The trail back felt longer than it should have, every rustle in the brush making me flinch. Kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone following, but the path stayed empty. Reached the truck sweating even in the cool air, hands shaking as I fumbled the key into the ignition. Drove out of there with the windows up and the radio loud, some old country station crackling in and out. I didn't stop till I was back on the main road, miles away. Pulled over at a scenic overlook, sat there till the sun started dropping behind the ridges. Told myself it was over. Heat, grief, lack of sleep, any explanation but the truth my mind kept circling back to. Decided to camp that night at a proper site farther down toward Cherokee, one with other folks around, picnic tables and fire rings. Felt safer. Set up my tent as dusk settled, built a little fire, heated beans straight from the can. The campground wasn't full, maybe half a dozen other sites occupied, lights flickering through the trees, low voices carrying now and then. Comforting sounds. I sat by the fire a long time, watching the flames, trying to push the day down deep where it couldn't reach me. Crawled into the tent around midnight, zipped up tight, lay there listening to crickets and the occasional hoot owl. Sleep started to pull at me. Then faint through the nylon, I heard it again. Whispers. Same cadence, same overlapping softness. Couldn't make out words at first, just that murmur, like wind through a hollow trunk miles away. But it was outside the tent, moving slow around the edges. I sat up, heart slamming against my ribs. Grabbed the flashlight, shone it through the mesh window. The beam cut across empty ground, fire burned down to coals, shadows jumping between the trees. Nothing there. The whispers kept circling. Then my name again, soft, pleading, Mama's voice this time, clear as if she was kneeling right outside the door. "Come on home, baby. It's time." I clamped my hands over my ears, but the sound wasn't in the air. It was inside somehow, vibrating in my skull. Daddy's laugh followed, low and warm like it used to be before the stroke took his words. More fragments, conversations from childhood, arguments, quiet moments on fishing trips. Every voice I'd ever loved and lost, calling me gentle from just beyond the tent walls. I don't know how long it lasted, minutes, hours. I lay curled on my side, eyes squeezed shut, waiting for morning. The whispers never got louder, never threatened, just kept asking, over and over, in the voices of the dead. When the first gray light finally seeped through the nylon, the voices faded slow, like someone walking away down a long hallway. I packed up before the sun was fully up, didn't bother with coffee or breakfast, just threw everything in the truck and drove. Haven't taken that Forest Service road since. Haven't stopped at unmarked pull-offs either. Some nights when the house is too quiet and the grief creeps back in, I'll hear a faint murmur in the walls, like wind through old wood, or voices overlapping far away. I turn the TV up or step outside where the crickets drowned it out. Because whatever that old oak was holding on to, it let a little piece follow me home. And sometimes when I'm drifting off to sleep, I swear I hear my name again. Soft, pleading, like someone still waiting in the dark inside a hollow tree I should have never stepped into.
It was late October 2021, and I'd been driving the Blue Ridge Parkway alone for 3 days straight, sleeping in my car at the overlooks, eating gas station sandwiches, trying to put distance between me and everything that had gone wrong back home. The divorce papers were still in the glove box, unsigned, like if I didn't look at them, they wouldn't be real. The parkway was perfect for that kind of running. Long stretches of empty asphalt winding through the mountains, no billboards, no traffic, just ridge after ridge rolling out like waves frozen in time. I'd pull off at random trailheads, hike a mile or two to stretch my legs, sit somewhere quiet until the hurt in my chest eased a little. It never went away completely, but out there, it got quieter. That particular evening, I was somewhere south of Asheville, maybe near Mount Pisgah, though I didn't check the signs close. The sun was already low, painting the valleys gold and the higher peaks purple. I passed a couple of the big overlooks packed with folks taking pictures, kept driving until I found a smaller pull-off with only one other car, an old Subaru, long abandoned by the look of the flat tires and cobwebs on the mirrors. A hand-painted wooden sign read, Ravens Ridge Trail, 1.2 miles, strenuous. The arrow pointed up a narrow path that switchbacked sharp into the laurel. I almost drove on, but the light was perfect and my legs were restless, so I grabbed my jacket, a half-full water bottle, and my little LED flashlight, even though I figured I'd be back before dark. Locked the car, started climbing. The trail wasted no time getting steep. Roots crisscrossed the dirt like tripwires, rocks slick with fallen leaves. I worked up a sweat quick, breath fogging in the cooling air. Rhododendrons closed in tight, forcing the path into tunnels where I had to duck branches. Every now and then the brush would open, and I'd get a glimpse down into the valleys, mist already rising slow out of the hollows like steam from a giant kettle. The higher I went, the quieter it got. No birds this late, no squirrels, just my boots scraping and the occasional clatter of a pebble I kicked loose. I broke out onto the ridge sooner than I expected, a long spine of exposed granite, grass growing in tufts between the stones, a few stunted oaks twisted by years of wind. The view stopped me cold. To the west, the sun hung just above the horizon, bleeding orange across layered ridges that faded into blue haze farther than the eye could follow. Eastward, the mountain dropped sharp into shadow. No sound but a faint breeze moving through the grass. I walked out to the edge, found a flat boulder warm from the day's sun, and sat, pulled my knees up, rested my chin on them, and just watched the light change. That's when I saw him. Across the little cove, on the next ridge over, maybe half a mile as the crow flies, less than that straight across the air, stood a figure. Tall, thin, dressed dark from head to toe. Jeans and a long-sleeved shirt, or maybe a coat, hard to tell at that distance. No hat, no backpack, no trekking poles, no bright colors like every other hiker I'd passed in days. Just standing there, on a rocky outcrop, facing my direction, motionless. At first I figured he was doing the same thing I was, taking in the sunset. I lifted a hand and waved, friendly like you do when you spot another soul out in the quiet. He didn't wave back, didn't shift his weight, didn't nod, didn't do anything, just kept standing, head pointed straight at me. I lowered my hand slow, feeling foolish. Maybe he didn't see me, maybe he was lost in his own thoughts. I watched him a while longer. The sun dipped lower, light turning redder, shadows stretching long across both ridges. He never moved. Not a sway, not a turn of the head to follow the view, like a photograph. A chill crept up my back that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. I told myself it was nothing. Some local who knew the spot didn't feel like company. But something about the stillness felt wrong. People shift, scratch, look around. They breathe visible in cold air. This figure was a silhouette cut out of black paper, pinned against the fading sky. The sun touched the horizon and slipped fast like it always does in the mountains. 1 minute there's color everywhere, the next it's gone, leaving just a gray afterglow. I stood up, brushed off my jeans, glanced across the cove one more time. He was still there, same spot, same posture. The distance made details impossible, but I swear he hadn't blinked the whole time. I turned and started down the trail quick, not running but not lingering either. The flashlight beam jittered across roots and rocks as the dark closed in. Halfway down, the path narrowed again, hugging the hillside with a drop-off to my left. I heard it then, rocks clattering somewhere above and to the right, loose gravel trickling down the slope. I stopped dead, shone the light up the trail behind me. Nothing but empty dirt and laurel. Listened hard. Silence. Started walking again, faster. A minute later, more rocks, closer this time, like someone descending parallel through the brush, maybe 20 yards upslope. Steady, deliberate steps dislodging stones. I called out, voice cracking a little. "Hey, you okay up there?" Only the breeze answered, carrying mist up from the valley.
I didn't stop again, kept moving, boots sliding on leaves, heart hammering loud in my ears. Every few switchbacks I'd hear it, faint crunch of leaves, snap of a twig, always the same distance off the trail, always keeping pace, never closer, never farther, like whatever it was knew exactly where I was and wanted to stay just out of sight. The flashlight beam seemed weaker the lower I went, swallowed quick by the thick brush. Sweat cooled on my skin even as I pushed harder. I burst out onto the pull-off breathless, lungs burning. My car sat alone under the rising moon, the abandoned Subaru still sagging nearby. I fumbled keys, dropped them once, finally got the door open and myself inside, locked it quick, started the engine, pulled out without looking back. Gravel spun under the tires as I accelerated onto the parkway. A mile or two down the road, I risked a glance in the rearview mirror. The ridge I'd climbed was visible in the moonlight, a dark line against the stars. And there, on the very top where the trail broke out, stood the silhouette again. Same spot I'd left him, arms at his sides, head turned toward the road. Watching. I drove another 10 miles before I pulled over at a big overlook, hands shaking on the wheel. Sat there a long time, staring at the empty parkway stretching both directions, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. No other cars passed, no lights in the valleys below, just me and the mountains and whatever had stood on that ridge. I finished the trip the next day, took the interstate home instead of staying on the parkway. Never did sign those papers, burned them in the fire pit out back a week later. But I don't hike alone at dusk anymore, especially not ridges with views across deep coves. Some evenings when the mist rises thick out of the hollows back home, I'll catch myself staring at the tree line across the field, half expecting to see a tall, dark figure standing motionless on the far hill, just watching, waiting for me to wave again. And the worst part is, sometimes I wonder if he was ever on the opposite ridge at all, or if he'd been on mine the whole time, standing quiet behind me while I watched the sun go down.
I never was one for crowds. Growing up in a holler outside Lexington, Kentucky, I learned early that too many people meant too much noise, too many eyes judging your every move. When my marriage finally fell apart last year, the quiet I'd always craved turned into something heavier, a loneliness that sat on my chest at night. I needed to get away from everything familiar, so I booked that lake house deep in the North Carolina mountains, where the Appalachians fold in on themselves and the maps show more green than roads. The listing promised total seclusion, dense forest ringing the property, a short path to a private lake, no other houses for miles. The photos showed tall pines crowding close, mist drifting between trunks. The cabin small and plain with a tin roof and a narrow porch facing the water. I packed my truck with the basics, left a note for my sister saying I'd be out of touch, and drove south until the pavement ended. The last stretch was a single-lane track that climbed a ridge and then plunged into a cove so deep the sun only reached the bottom in patches. When the lake appeared below, it lay still and dark, shaped like a long teardrop, its far shore lost in shadow. The cabin sat on a flat point near the outlet, logs darkened by decades of rain, windows small and watchful. I parked on pine needles, cut the engine, and sat a moment listening to the quiet. It wasn't peaceful exactly, more like the woods were holding their breath. I carried my bags inside, set coffee to percolate on the propane stove, and stepped out onto the back path that led to the water. The trees grew thick right up to the banks, roots twisting into the mud like fingers. Fog lingered in the low spots even though it was midday, curling around trunks and swallowing sound. The first day passed easy enough. I hiked the ridge trail behind the house, found an old logging road choked with laurel, came back with burrs on my jeans and sweat cooling on my skin. I swam in the lake once. The water was cold and clear near the edge, dropping off fast into blackness. Evenings I cooked on the little grill, sat on the porch with a book I didn't really read, watched darkness settle between the trees. That night I slept hard, windows open to the smell of damp earth and pine. It started the next morning, subtle as a trick of light. I was on the porch with coffee when I noticed movement in the fog between the pines. Tall, thin shapes standing motionless, half hidden by trunks. I blinked, looked harder, but the mist shifted and they were gone. Could have been stumps or shadows, I told myself. The forest plays games with your eyes when you're not used to it. I shook it off, spent the day fishing from the bank, catching nothing but enjoying the rhythm of casting. But at dusk, walking back from the water, I saw them again. 3 figures, maybe 4, spaced among the trees, facing the house. They didn't move, just stood there like they'd been waiting. I stopped on the path, heart kicking a little, and called out a hello that echoed back flat. No answer. I took a step toward them and the fog thickened suddenly, swallowing everything. When it thinned again, the shapes had vanished, leaving no broken branches, no footprints in the soft ground. I tried to laugh it off that night, told myself I was jumping at shadows because I was alone. But sleep came slow, and I woke once to the sound of something moving outside, soft footfalls on pine needles, circling slow. I lay rigid, listening until the steps faded toward the lake. Morning light made it feel foolish again. I
hiked deeper that day, following a faint trail that climbed the opposite slope. The woods grew older the higher I went, hemlocks thick as church pillars, understory choked with rhododendrons so dense I had to push through. Near the ridge, I stumbled into a clearing I hadn't expected, a flat space maybe 30 yards across, overgrown with ferns and briars, dotted with low stone markers half sunk in the earth. No names, no dates, just rough field stones set in uneven rows, an old settlement swallowed whole by the forest. I stood there a long minute, feeling the weight of it, people who'd lived and died here, forgotten so completely even their graves were vanishing. On the walk back, the fog rolled in early, thick enough to lose the trail twice. I kept seeing movement at the edge of vision, shapes keeping pace among the trunks, always just out of clear sight. By the fourth day, the sightings were constant. I'd glance out a window and catch a silhouette standing at the tree line, head tilted like it was studying me. They never came closer than 50 yards, never made a sound I could name, but their presence pressed in heavier each time. The lake reflected the unease. Its surface stayed flat even when wind moved the treetops, banks muddy and sucking at my boots when I tried to fish. I stopped going far from the house, kept busy inside cleaning what didn't need cleaning, reading the same pages over and over. At twilight, the figures multiplied, dozens now, spaced among the pines like silent sentinels. I watched from the porch until the fog hid them, heart thudding slow and steady. That evening, I barred the doors early, drew the curtains tight though they were thin and old. Rain started after dark, soft at first, then harder, drumming the tin roof and streaking the windows. I built a fire for the noise more than warmth, sat close to it with a flashlight in my lap. Around midnight, the rain eased, and in the sudden quiet, I heard branches scraping overhead, slow, deliberate drags across the shingles, as if something heavy was moving on the roof. I froze, listening as it circled the chimney, paused, circled again, then silence. I crept to the window, pulled the curtain an inch. Fog pressed against the glass like smoke, and in it faces appeared, pale, indistinct, eyes dark hollows. They didn't blink, just watched, mouths slightly open. When I moved, they moved the same way, a fraction behind like reflections in warped glass. I dropped the curtain, backed away, breath shallow. The scraping started again, lower now, along the walls outside. I checked every door, every window, locked tight. But the cold crept in anyway, settling in the corners, carrying a faint smell of turned earth. Whispers came with it, so soft I felt them more than heard. Sighs riding the draft under the doors, words lost in the wind through the pines. I barricaded myself in the bedroom, pushed the dresser against the door, sat on the bed with my back to the wall. The house creaked and settled around me, but underneath were other sounds, footfalls on the porch, fingers brushing the siding, breaths fogging the glass from outside. I didn't sleep. Dawn came gray and slow. The rain had stopped, the woods dripping. I waited until full light before venturing out, flashlight in one hand, truck keys in the other. The air was thick with mist, visibility barely past the porch rails. I walked the perimeter slow, looking for signs, broken branches, footprints, anything. Nothing at first. Then I saw them, bare footprints in the soft earth around the foundation, small and large, circling the house over and over, some pressed deep as if the walkers had stood in place a long while. They stopped at every window, toes pointed inward. No prints leading away, none coming in, just endless loops fading into the fog toward the trees. I didn't pack. I threw what I could grab into the truck, bag, cooler, the book I'd been pretending to read, and backed out fast, tires spinning on wet needles before catching gravel. The track climbed the ridge slow, fog thinning as I gained height. At the top I stopped, couldn't help it, and looked back. The cove lay below me, lake a dull coin in the mist, cabin a dark speck. And among the trees, shapes moved, dozens, maybe hundreds, drifting out from the trunks, gathering at the clearing's edge, watching the road where I'd gone. They didn't follow, just stood there, patient as stone, fading slow as the fog closed around them again. It's been 8 months now. I rent a place on the edge of town, windows facing a parking lot where lights burn all night. I don't hike anymore, don't seek out quiet. But when the fog rolls in thick off the river, or when I wake to rain tapping the glass, I feel them still, eyes at the edge of sight, shapes keeping pace in the corner of my vision. And sometimes, driving backroads at dusk, I catch glimpses in the rear view, tall figures standing just inside a tree line, motionless, waiting for the next person who needs solitude bad enough to drive deep into those mountains alone. The woods remember everyone who ever lived there, and some of them, I think, don't much care for being forgotten.
I'd been driving for hours when I turned off the highway into the Daniel Boone National Forest, the kind of late afternoon decision you make when the road has started feeling too straight and the radio stations have all turned to static. My grandfather used to take me fishing in these parts when I was a kid, back before the arthritis took his hands and the emphysema took his breath. He'd point out ridges and hollows like they were old friends, tell stories about the men who logged them or mined them or just walked away into them and never came back. I hadn't been here in 20 years, not since the funeral, but something pulled me off the interstate near Slade. Maybe nostalgia, maybe just the need to feel small under big trees again. I had a backpack, a tent, a sleeping bag rated for 3 seasons, and enough food for 2 nights. That was all I planned to need. The trailhead was unmarked, except for a faded brown Forest Service sign half covered in kudzu. I parked the truck in the gravel pull-off, shouldered the pack, and started walking as the sun dropped behind the western ridge. The path followed an old logging road for the first mile, then narrowed to single track, winding along a creek that ran clear and cold over mossy stones. I hiked until the light turned gold and the shadows stretched long. Found a flat spot near the stream where the ground was soft with pine needles and the water sounded like steady breathing. I set up the tent quick, gathered deadfall for a fire, and built it small but hot. The flames snapped and popped, sending sparks up into the darkening sky. I ate beans from a can heated over the coals and sat listening to the forest settle. Crickets, a distant owl, the creek murmuring over rocks. For the first time in months, I felt the knot in my chest loosen. I was banking the fire for the night when I heard it. My name, clear as a bell, spoken from the trees across the stream. Not shouted, not whispered, just said, calm and familiar, the way someone calls you from the porch when supper's ready. The voice was his, Tommy's, my best friend since 3rd grade, the one who'd laughed at my dumb jokes, who'd stood beside me at my wedding, who'd died in a car wreck on Route 11 years ago next month. I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth, beans cooling on my tongue. The forest went quiet, like it was listening too. I set the spoon down slow. Tommy. My voice sounded small against the trees. No answer, only the creak and the soft crackle of the fire. I told myself it was imagination, grief playing tricks, the mind filling silence with what it wants to hear. I'd read about that once, how isolation can make you hear things. I laughed at myself, low and shaky, and crawled into the tent. The sleeping bag was cold at first, then warmed. I lay there staring at the nylon ceiling, listening to the fire die down outside. Sleep came slow, but it came. I woke sometime deep in the night to the sound of my name again, closer this time. Not from across the stream, somewhere along the bank, maybe 20 yards upstream. The same voice, the same calm tone, like he was just walking up the trail to check on me. I sat up fast, heart slamming against my ribs. The tent felt too small, the dark outside too close. I fumbled for the headlamp, clicked it on, and swept the beam through the mesh window. Nothing but trees and fog curling low along the ground. The fire had burned to coals, glowing faint red. I sat there listening, breath shallow. Minutes passed. Nothing. I told myself it was a dream or an animal mimicking sound. Foxes can do that, I'd read somewhere. I turned off the light, lay back down, and tried to slow my breathing. It called again an hour later. Different direction this time. Downstream, closer to the trail. Come on, man, it's cold out here. The words carried that old half-laugh Tommy used when he was teasing me, the one that always made me grin even when I was mad. I didn't answer. I just lay there, rigid, waiting for it to stop. It did, eventually, but the silence afterward felt worse, empty, waiting to be filled. By 3 in the morning, I couldn't take it. I unzipped the sleeping bag, pulled on my boots, stuffed everything into the pack with shaking hands. The coals were dead. I kicked dirt over them anyway. Headlamp on, I started hiking out. The trail looked different in the narrow cone of light, trees leaning closer, roots reaching higher. Every few minutes, the voice called again, sometimes from ahead, sometimes from behind, sometimes off to the side in the brush. Always the same distance, never quite close enough to see. Wait up, where you going? The words echoed a little, bouncing off ridges I couldn't see. I walked faster, then jogged when the trail allowed, pack bouncing against my back. Sweat soaked my shirt despite the chill. The calls followed, patient, never angry, just curious, like Tommy was wondering why I was leaving without saying goodbye. The trail seemed longer than it had coming in. Sections I remembered as flat stretched uphill. Turns I'd taken without thinking now felt wrong. I stopped once to check the map on my phone. No signal, but the GPS still showed the little blue dot moving along the line. I was going the right way. I had to be. I kept moving. The voice kept pace. Hey, slow down. Talk to me. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat was too tight. Dawn was gray and thin when I finally saw the trailhead sign through the trees. The truck sat where I'd left it, frost on the hood. I broke into a run the last 100 yards, lungs burning, legs shaking. I yanked the door open, threw the pack inside, slammed it shut, and locked every door. For a long minute, I just sat there, hands on the wheel, breathing hard, staring at the trailhead. The forest was quiet now. No calls, no echoes, just birds starting up and the soft drip of dew from branches. I started the engine, heater blasting, and pulled onto the gravel road. The sun rose slow behind the ridge, turning the fog to gold. I drove careful, watching the mirrors more than the road. Nothing followed. No lights, no shapes, no voice. Just the hum of tires and the occasional clink of the suspension. I told myself it was over. But about 30 miles later, when the road straightened and the trees thinned, and the radio finally picked up a signal, I caught it, faint, under the static of a country station. The same voice saying my name once, soft, almost gentle, like a question. I turned the volume down. It was gone.
I turned it back up, nothing but twangy guitar and a man singing about lost highways. I kept driving, windows cracked, cold air rushing in. Every now and then, in the quiet stretches between towns, I swear I hear it again, distant, fading, but still there, calling like it's waiting for me to answer, like it knows I'll come back someday, when the quiet gets too heavy and the road looks too straight again. I haven't been back to those woods. I don't know if I ever will. But some nights, when the house is still and the wind moves through the trees outside, I catch myself listening, waiting, wondering if the next time it calls, I'll have the strength to stay quiet, or if I'll finally say something back.
I had been on the road for 6 days, driving the backways through western North Carolina, the kind of trip where you let the GPS sit dark and follow whatever road looks interesting. The mill had shut down for 2 weeks of maintenance, and I needed the miles to shake off the rust of routine. I'd packed light, a tent, a cooler, my old Nikon, and a notebook I hadn't opened since college. That afternoon, I'd pulled into the Nantahala National Forest near the Standing Indian area, parked at a pull-off where a faint trail sign leaned sideways, half covered in moss. The map showed a loop to a waterfall, 5 miles round trip. I figured I'd take it slow, shoot some photos, be back at the truck before dark. The main trail was wide and worn, pine needles soft underfoot, sunlight slanting through the canopy in long golden bars. I walked easy, stopping now and then to frame a rhododendron bloom or the way mist hung low in a hollow. About 2 miles in, I saw the deer, a young buck, maybe a yearling, stepping deliberate across the path ahead. It paused, ears swiveling, then slipped off into the brush on a faint side trail. Something about the way it moved, calm, unhurried, made me curious. I followed. The path wasn't marked, just a narrow line worn into the duff, probably used by animals more than people. The trees close in tighter, hemlocks and tulip poplars crowding close, the air cooler and damp. I told myself I'd go 20 minutes, no more, then turn back. The deer trail climbed a gentle rise, then dropped into a small bowl-shaped clearing, maybe 30 yards across. The change was sudden, forest floor giving way to open ground, grass thin and patchy, stones half sunk in the earth. I stopped short. It was a cemetery. Old. Forgotten. The headstones were rough fieldstone and slate, most tilted, many cracked, dates carved in shallow letters that went back to the 1840s, 1850s, a few into the early 1900s. Names I didn't recognize: Crowder, Ledbetter, Honeycutt, some with small crosses etched beside them, others blank. A few graves were sunken. The earth collapsed inward, like the coffins beneath had rotted through. No fence, no path, just stones scattered among ferns and blackberry briars. The place felt heavy, like the air itself remembered the weight of the dead. I stood there a long minute, feeling like an intruder. I should have turned around right then, but the light was good, soft, diffused by the canopy, and the stones had that quiet dignity old graveyards carry. I pulled out the camera, took a few careful shots, one of a tilted marker for a child, another of paired stones that must have been husband and wife, the dates only months apart. I kept the shutter quiet, no flash. Every click felt too loud in the stillness. I told myself I was just documenting history, that these people deserved to be seen again, even if only in pixels. I moved slow, respectful, stepping wide around the sunken spots. That's when I saw the fresh mound. It sat near the back edge of the clearing, separate from the others, maybe 10 feet from the nearest stone. No marker, no name, just a low rise of dark earth, freshly turned, the soil loose and dark like it had been disturbed within the last few days. No grass had started on it yet. No flowers, no wreath, no sign anyone had visited. The shape was unmistakable, a grave-sized rectangle, the dirt piled slightly higher in the middle. I stared at it, stomach turning slow. The rest of the cemetery had the patina of decades. This looked new. Too new. I stepped closer, then stopped. The air around it smelled different. Wet earth, something faintly metallic. I told myself it could be anything. An animal burial, someone's pet, a poacher hiding evidence. But the shape was too deliberate, too human. I took one photo, quick, then backed away. The deer was long gone. The clearing felt smaller now, the trees leaning in. I turned and started back the way I'd come, moving faster than I'd intended. The trail seemed narrower on the return, branches snagging at my sleeves, roots catching my boots. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing among the stones watching me leave. Nothing. Just fog beginning to drift in low, softening the trunks.
I made it to the main trail in less time than it should have taken, then hiked hard back to the truck. By the time I reached pavement, the sun was gone, sky gone bruise purple. I drove until I found a cheap motel in Franklin, checked in, showered hot enough to scald, and fell into bed without unpacking. Sleep came in pieces. Around 3, I woke from a dream I couldn't quite hold on to. Hands pushing up through soil, fingers breaking the surface, reaching. The room was dark except for the red clock radio. I lay there sweating, sheets tangled, listening to the hum of the heater. The dream lingered like damp clothes. I got up, paced the room, checked the locks twice. In the morning, I told myself it was just a bad night, grief and fatigue, and too many hours alone. I didn't look at the photos on the camera. I drove on. 2 weeks later, back in my apartment in Asheville, the dream hadn't faded. It came every few nights, always the same. Hands, pale, dirt-caked, breaking through that fresh mound, fingers flexing like they were testing the air. I'd wait gasping, heart hammering, the smell of wet earth in my nose, though the windows were closed. I finally opened the camera and scrolled through the shots. The old stones looked ordinary in daylight, weathered and sad. The fresh mound was there too, sharp in the frame, the soil almost black. I stared at it a long time, then closed the laptop. I couldn't leave it alone. I went online, searched Forest Service records, topo maps, historical surveys of the Nantahala. Nothing. No mention of a cemetery in that drainage. No abandoned homestead, no family plot. The trail I'd followed wasn't on any map I could find. I called the ranger station, spoke to a woman who sounded tired. She checked, said there were known cemeteries in the district, old churchyards, settler graves, but nothing matching my description near that trailhead. Sometimes folks find old family plots off the beaten path, she said. They're not always documented. You sure you were in the right spot? I gave her the GPS coordinates for my phone. She went quiet a moment. That area has been logged over twice since the 30s. No structures listed, no graves. You might have wandered onto private land. I thanked her, hung up, felt worse. I stopped looking after that. I told myself I'd imagined the freshness of the mound, light playing tricks, recent rain loosening the soil. I deleted the photos, formatted the card, tried to forget. But the dream kept coming. And sometimes driving backroads at dusk, I'll catch a scent through the open window, wet earth after rain, the faint metallic tang of turned soil, and my hands tighten on the wheel. I don't hike alone anymore. I don't follow side trails. I stay on marked paths, keep the forest at arm's length.
I remember the weekend clear as the cold air that day, though it's been 3 autumns since. 4 of us, me, Sarah, her brother Jake, and his girlfriend Mia, had piled into Jake's old Jeep for a last-minute road trip to the Cumberland Plateau. We were all in that restless place where jobs had settled into routine and the mountains called louder than the city ever could. The big South Fork National River and Recreation Area seemed perfect. Remote trails, deep gorges, and enough elevation to feel like you'd stepped out of Tennessee entirely. We planned a moderate loop, 12 miles, a night at a backcountry site, then out the next day. Nothing ambitious, just time to breathe. We left Knoxville before dawn. The sky still bruised purple when we hit the gravel access road. By the time we parked at the trailhead near Leatherwood Ford, the sun was up but thin, filtered through a ceiling of gray. The forecast called for fog in the hollows, nothing unusual for October. We shouldered packs, checked headlamps and water, and started down the trail. The path followed the river for the first mile, then climbed a series of switchbacks into mixed hardwood and pine. Leaves were turning hard, maple red, oak gold, and the air smelled sharp with decay and resin. We talked easy at first, trading stories, laughing at how Jake still couldn't tie a decent bowline. The forest felt open, welcoming, the kind of place that makes you forget the rest of the world exists. The fog came in quiet around 2 o'clock. 1 minute we were walking in dappled light, the next the trees ahead softened, then disappeared. Visibility dropped to 30 feet, maybe less. The world shrank to the trail under our boots and the shapes of the people in front of us. We slowed, stuck closer together, voices lower without meaning to. "This is why they call it the Big South Fork," Sarah said, half joking. "You lose half the park in 5 minutes." We kept moving, figuring the fog would burn off as the afternoon warmed. It didn't. The first time I noticed the shadows, I thought it was just the light playing tricks. We were on a long, straight stretch, the trail following the contour of the ridge, when I caught movement in my peripheral vision, something paralleling us through the trees to the right. I glanced over and saw shapes, tall, upright, moving at the same pace we were. Too far to make out details, but the rhythm was exact. Step for step, pause when we paused to catch our breath. I stopped walking. So did they. I pointed them out to the others, voice low. Jake squinted, then shrugged. Probably just our own shadows stretched weird in the fog. Happens all the time. Mia nodded, but her eyes kept darting to the side.
Sarah squeezed my hand once, quick, and we started again. The shadows started again too. We walked faster. The trail dipped into a small hollow, then climbed again. The fog thickened, swallowing sound. Our footsteps sounded muffled, distant. Every time we stopped to drink water or adjust packs, the shadows stopped. When we moved, they moved. They stayed just beyond clear sight, never close enough to see faces, never far enough to lose them. I tried to convince myself it was optics, fog refracting light, our own silhouettes multiplied by moisture and trees. But the shadows weren't identical to us. They were close, same height, same gait, but something was off. A limb held too long, a turn too sharp, like someone imitating us badly, or someone who hadn't walked upright in a long time. Jake was the first to voice it. "They're mirroring us," he said, voice tight. Not following, mirroring. We all felt it then. The way the shadows didn't just copy our motion, but seemed to anticipate it, like they knew where we'd step before we did. Sarah shone her headlamp into the mist. The beam cut a tunnel of white, illuminating trunks and ferns and nothing else. The shadows vanished the instant the light touched them, gone like smoke. We stood there breathing hard, waiting. Nothing. We turned back to the trail, and after a dozen steps, they were back. Same distance, same pace, waiting just outside the beam. We tried to outrun them. We walked faster, then jogged where the trail allowed. The shadows kept up without effort, never closing the gap, never falling behind. Once, when we crested a rise and paused to look back, I caught a clearer glimpse. 4 upright forms, indistinct but unmistakably human-shaped, standing motionless among the trees. One of them tilted its head the way Sarah does when she's listening, slow, curious. My stomach dropped. We didn't speak. We just turned and moved. The trail felt endless. Sections we'd hiked in 10 minutes coming down took 20 going back. The fog pressed in, cold and wet against our skin. Every rustle in the underbrush made us flinch. Once I heard branches snap, sharp, deliberate, off to the left. We stopped. So did the shadows. The snap came again, from the right. We started walking. The snapping followed, slow and rhythmic, like someone pacing us through the brush. No voices, no calls. Just that steady, patient accompaniment. Panic built quiet but deep. Sweat ran cold down my back. Sarah's breathing was short, sharp. Jake kept glancing over his shoulder, jaw tight. Mia walked with her hands clenched, eyes wide. We didn't run full out, not yet, but our pace turned urgent. The trail dropped steeply toward the river gorge, switchbacks tight, footing slick with wet leaves. We slipped, caught ourselves, kept going. The shadows matched every movement. When we stumbled, they seemed to hesitate. When we regained balance, they continued smooth, like they were learning us. The last mile was a blur. The trail widened, flattened, and we burst into a run. Packs bouncing, lungs burning, boots pounding dirt. The fog thinned suddenly near the bottom, daylight bleeding through. We burst out of the trees onto the gravel access road, the Jeep sitting where we'd left it, a solid, blessed shape. We piled in, doors slamming, locks clicking down. For a long moment, no one spoke. We sat breathing hard, staring out the windshield at the trailhead. The fog hung behind us like a curtain, white and impenetrable. Nothing emerged, no shapes, no movement, just stillness. We drove out slow, windows down, cold air rushing in. The sun was low now, turning the ridges gold. We didn't talk about it at first. We stopped at a diner in Oneida, ordered coffee we didn't drink, sat in silence until someone finally said it out loud. "They weren't ours," Jake said. "The shadows, they weren't ours." We nodded. We didn't need to say more. We laughed about it later back in Knoxville. Nervous laughter, the kind that fades quick. We told the story at bars over beers, called it a trick of the fog, pareidolia, anything that made it smaller. But none of us hike in heavy mist anymore. We stick to clear days, marked trails, groups larger than 4. Sarah won't walk ahead of me on narrow paths. Jake checks the trail line every few steps. Mia keeps her headlamp on even when the sun's up. Me, I still see them sometimes, in the corner of my eye when fog rolls in off the river, or when I wake at night to the sound of footsteps pacing outside the bedroom window. Slow, deliberate, matching my breathing. I tell myself it was light and mist and fear. I tell myself we imagined the wrongness in the shapes, the way they learned our movements too perfectly. But deep down I know better. Something in those woods watched us that day, studied us, walked beside us without ever showing its face. It didn't chase, it didn't need to. It just waited, patient as the mountains, for the next group of people who think the fog is only weather, and that the shadows belong to them alone. Some things in the Cumberland don't follow you out. They just stay, watching the trailhead, waiting for the mist to roll in thick again. And when it does, they step out of the trees, quiet and exact, ready to walk with whoever comes next.
I left Richmond early that October morning. The kind of crisp fall day where the sky looks freshly washed and the leaves are just starting to burn red and gold along the ridges. Work had been grinding me down. Long hours at the engineering firm, a project deadline that kept getting pushed, and the slow unraveling of a relationship that had already died but neither of us wanted to bury. I needed to get out, to walk until my legs hurt and my mind went quiet. The Shenandoah backcountry seemed right. Remote trails, no crowds, just forest and stone and the Blue Ridge doing what it's done for millions of years. I packed light, a day pack, water, snacks, a map, my phone for the GPS app, and drove west until the interstate gave way to winding 2 lanes, then gravel, then dirt.
I parked at a small pull-off on Skyline Drive's lesser-used southern end, where a faint trailhead marker leaned against a pine. The map showed a simple out and back, 4 miles to an old fire tower foundation, then back the same way. 6 hours total, easy. I locked the car, shouldered the pack, and started down. The trail was narrow but clear, descending gently through mixed hardwoods. Sunlight dappled the path, leaves crunching underfoot. I felt the weight lift almost immediately. Birds called overhead, a breeze moved high in the canopy, and for the first time in months I wasn't thinking about deadlines or arguments or what came next. The first couple of hours passed in that easy rhythm you only find alone in the woods. I stopped at overlooks, took photos of the valley below, ate an apple sitting on a log. Around noon I reached the fire tower site. Nothing left but a concrete pad and a few rusted bolts. I sat there a while, legs stretched out, watching clouds drift over the next ridge. The return trip should have been straightforward. Climb back the way I came, same landmarks in reverse. I felt good, tired, but the good kind of tired. That's when the repetition started. I noticed it first with a tree, a big tulip poplar, split trunk, one branch bent low like an elbow. I'd passed it on the way in, remembered because it looked like it was pointing the direction. On the way back, I passed it again, same bend, same angle. I paused, frowned. Coincidence, probably. Lots of trees look alike. I kept walking. A mile later, I saw the same rock formation, 3 flat stones stacked like a crude cairn, moss on the north side. I'd photographed it coming down. Now it was here again, identical. My stomach tightened. I checked the map, still on the right trail, still heading uphill toward the road. I told myself I was just tired, seeing patterns where there weren't any. I walked faster. The trail climbed, then leveled, then climbed again. Same sequence as the descent, but now it felt wrong. Too familiar, too exact. The bent tree appeared a third time. I stopped, heart beating harder. I pulled out my phone. No signal bars. The GPS app had frozen on the last known position, hours old. I restarted it. The map spun, then showed me in the middle of nowhere, no trail line. I swore under my breath, turned around, started backtracking the way I thought I'd come. The rock cairn, the split poplar, the same stretch of trail, same fallen log, same patch of ferns. I walked for what felt like an hour, climbing when I should have been descending, passing the same landmarks in the wrong order. Panic came slow but deep. I stopped, drank water, tried to breathe steady. The woods were quiet. No birds now, no breeze, just the sound of my own breathing and the crunch of leaves. I tried shouting once, just to hear something human. My voice bounced back flat, swallowed by the trees. I started walking again, faster, choosing direction by instinct rather than map. Uphill seemed wrong, so I went down. The trail looped, same switchback, same root ball, same view of the same ridge through the same gap in the canopy. Hours passed. The light shifted, afternoon gold turning to evening amber. My legs ached, pack straps cutting into my shoulders. I was thirsty, out of water, mouth dry as dust. I don't know how long I walked. Time blurred. The woods grew darker, shadows stretching long. I kept seeing the same things. The bent tree, the cairn, the log. They appeared in different order, different light, but always the same. I sat on the log once, head in hands, trying not to cry. That's when I heard it. Soft, distant, the crunch of leaves behind me. I spun around. Nothing. I stood, listened. Another step, then silence. I walked. The steps followed, matching mine, stopping when I stopped. I ran a stretch, lungs burning. The steps ran too. I stopped. They stopped. I shouted again, voice cracking. The echo came back wrong, off key, delayed, like someone else saying my name a second later. I don't remember deciding to bushwhack. I just left the trail. I pushed through rhododendron, thorns tearing at my sleeves, roots catching my boots. The going was slow, steep. I climbed a rise, hoping for a view, for anything familiar. At the top, I broke into a clearing. Open sky, sunset red on the horizon. Below me, miles away, a thin line of road glinted. Not the road I'd parked on, different direction entirely. I slid down the slope, half running, half falling, until I hit pavement. Asphalt under my feet felt like mercy. I followed the road, walking in the dark now, headlamp on low. Cars were rare. When headlights finally swept around a curve, I waved them down. A park ranger, face tired but kind. He drove me back to my trailhead. My truck was there, exactly where I'd left it, but the odometer showed 30 extra miles I hadn't driven. The ranger asked if I'd seen anyone else. I shook my head. He nodded, said sometimes people get turned around in the fog, that the trails play tricks. He didn't mention the extra miles. I didn't either. I drove home that night, windows down, cold air rushing in. I kept the radio off. Every time the road went quiet, I thought I heard footsteps crunching beside the car, keeping pace. I told myself it was tires on pavement, wind, imagination, but I haven't gone gone back to the Shenandoah alone. I don't hike unmarked trails anymore, and sometimes when I'm driving empty backroads at dusk and the trees close in, I'll glance in the mirror and see the same bent poplar reflected behind me, the same rock cairn, the same stretch of trail I walked for hours that day. The road always leads home eventually, but some trails don't end when you think they do. They just wait, patient, looping forever, ready to pull you back in when you least expect it. And when they do, you walk until your legs give out, until the light fails, until you finally break through to somewhere else entirely, and wonder if the place you started from is still there, or if you left it behind somewhere in the endless turns of a path that never wanted to let you go.
I left Richmond early that October morning, the kind of crisp fall day where the sky looks freshly washed and the leaves are just starting to burn red and gold along the ridges. Work had been grinding me down. Long hours at the engineering firm, a project deadline that kept getting pushed, and the slow unraveling of a relationship that had already died but neither of us wanted to bury. I needed to get out, to walk until my legs hurt and my mind went quiet. The Shenandoah backcountry seemed right. Remote trails, no crowds, just forest and stone and the Blue Ridge doing what it's done for millions of years. I packed light, a day pack, water, snacks, a map, my phone for the GPS app, and drove west until the interstate gave way to winding 2 lanes, then gravel, then dirt. I parked at a small pull-off on Skyline Drive's lesser-used southern end, where a faint trailhead marker leaned against a pine. The map showed a simple out and back, 4 miles to an old fire tower foundation, then back the same way. 6 hours total, easy. I locked the car, shouldered the pack, and started down. The trail was narrow but clear, descending gently through mixed hardwoods. Sunlight dappled the path, leaves crunching underfoot. I felt the weight lift almost immediately. Birds called overhead, a breeze moved high in the canopy, and for the first time in months I wasn't thinking about deadlines or arguments or what came next. The first couple of hours passed in that easy rhythm you only find alone in the woods. I stopped at overlooks, took photos of the valley below, ate an apple sitting on a log. Around noon I reached the fire tower site. Nothing left but a concrete pad and a few rusted bolts. I sat there a while, legs stretched out, watching clouds drift over the next ridge. The return trip should have been straightforward. Climb back the way I came, same landmarks in reverse. I felt good, tired, but the good kind of tired. That's when the repetition started. I noticed it first with a tree, a big tulip poplar, split trunk, one branch bent low like an elbow. I'd passed it on the way in, remembered because it looked like it was pointing the direction. On the way back, I passed it again, same bend, same angle. I paused, frowned. Coincidence, probably. Lots of trees look alike. I kept walking. A mile later, I saw the same rock formation, 3 flat stones stacked like a crude cairn, moss on the north side. I'd photographed it coming down. Now it was here again, identical. My stomach tightened. I checked the map, still on the right trail, still heading uphill toward the road. I told myself I was just tired, seeing patterns where there weren't any. I walked faster. The trail climbed, then leveled, then climbed again. Same sequence as the descent, but now it felt wrong. Too familiar, too exact. The bent tree appeared a third time. I stopped, heart beating harder. I pulled out my phone. No signal bars. The GPS app had frozen on the last known position, hours old. I restarted it. The map spun, then showed me in the middle of nowhere, no trail line. I swore under my breath, turned around, started backtracking the way I thought I'd come. The rock cairn, the split poplar, the same stretch of trail, same fallen log, same patch of ferns. I walked for what felt like an hour, climbing when I should have been descending, passing the same landmarks in the wrong order. Panic came slow but deep. I stopped, drank water, tried to breathe steady. The woods were quiet. No birds now, no breeze, just the sound of my own breathing and the crunch of leaves. I tried shouting once, just to hear something human. My voice bounced back flat, swallowed by the trees. I started walking again, faster, choosing direction by instinct rather than map. Uphill seemed wrong, so I went down. The trail looped, same switchback, same route bow, same view of the same ridge through the same gap in the canopy. Hours passed. The light shifted, afternoon gold turning to evening amber. My legs ached, pack straps cutting into my shoulders. I was thirsty, out of water, mouth dry as dust. I don't know how long I walked. Time blurred. The woods grew darker, shadows stretching long. I kept seeing the same things. The bent tree, the cairn, the log. They appeared in different order, different light, but always the same. I sat on the log once, head in hands, trying not to cry. That's when I heard it. Soft, distant, the crunch of leaves behind me. I spun around. Nothing. I stood, listened. Another step, then silence. I walked. The steps followed, matching mine, stopping when I stopped. I ran as
stretch, lungs burning. The steps ran too. I stopped. They stopped. I shouted again, voice cracking. The echo came back wrong. Off-key, delayed, like someone else saying my name a second later. I don't remember deciding to bushwhack. I just left the trail. I pushed through rhododendron, thorns tearing at my sleeves, roots catching my boots. The going was slow, steep. I climbed a rise, hoping for a view, for anything familiar. At the top, I broke into a clearing. Open sky, sunset red on the horizon. Below me, miles away, a thin line of road glinted. Not the road I'd parked on, different direction entirely. I slid down the slope, half running, half falling, until I hit pavement. Asphalt under my feet felt like mercy. I followed the road, walking in the dark now, headlamp on low. Cars were rare. When headlights finally swept around a curve, I waved them down. A park ranger, face tired but kind. He drove me back to my trailhead. My truck was there, exactly where I'd left it, but the odometer showed 30 extra miles I hadn't driven. The ranger asked if I'd seen anyone else. I shook my head. He nodded, said sometimes people get turned around in the fog, that the trails play tricks. He didn't mention the extra miles. I didn't either. I drove home that night, windows down, cold air rushing in. I kept the radio off. Every time the road went quiet, I thought I heard footsteps crunching beside the car, keeping pace. I told myself it was tires on pavement, wind, imagination, but I haven't gone back to the Shenandoah alone. I don't hike unmarked trails anymore, and sometimes when I'm driving empty backroads at dusk and the trees close in, I'll glance in the mirror and see the same bent poplar reflected behind me, the same rock cairn, the same stretch of trail I walked for hours that day. The road always leads home eventually, but some trails don't end when you think they do. They just wait, patient, looping forever, ready to pull you back in when you least expect it. And when they do, you walk until your legs give out, until the light fails, until you finally break through to somewhere else entirely, and wonder if the place you started from is still there, or if you left it behind somewhere in the endless turns of a path that never wanted to let you go.
I remember the night clear as yesterday, though it's been almost 2 years now. Sarah and I had been together long enough that we didn't need to fill every silence with words. That summer we were both burned out. She from grad school deadlines, me from swing shifts at the mill in Warren. So we decided to take a few days and drive up into the Allegheny National Forest. No real plan, just a tent, a cooler, and the kind of quiet you can't find in town. We'd heard the trails around the Allegheny Reservoir were beautiful under moonlight, especially on a full moon, and the weather looked perfect. So after dinner at a diner in Kane, we headed north on Route 321, turned onto a gravel forest road, and parked where a narrow path cut into the pines. The moon was high and bright, silvering the treetops, turning the ground almost blue. We grabbed our day packs, headlamps on low just in case, and started walking. The trail was wide and well-trodden, carpeted with pine needles that muffled our steps. The air smelled sharp and clean, resin, damp earth, a faint hint of water from the reservoir miles away. We didn't talk much at first, just walked hand in hand, listening to the occasional barred owl calling far off. The forest felt alive, but not threatening. The kind of place where you remember you're small, but not unwelcome. After maybe 20 minutes, the path climbed gently, then leveled out along a ridge. We stopped at a clearing where the trees opened enough to see stars through the canopy. Sarah leaned against me, head on my shoulder, and for a minute everything felt right. That's when I noticed the lights. They were behind us, down the trail we'd just come up. Small, pale orbs, maybe the size of flashlights seen from far away, floating low to the ground. They bobbed slightly, like someone walking with a lantern held at hip level. I pointed them out to Sarah, half smiling. "Looks like we've got company," I said. She squinted, then shrugged. "Probably other hikers. It's a full moon. Lots of people come out for this." We kept walking, slower now, glancing back every few steps. The lights stayed the same distance, following our pace exactly, never closing, never falling behind. They didn't flicker like headlamps usually do. They were steady, almost soft, like paper lanterns drifting on a current. After another quarter mile, curiosity got the better of us. We stopped dead in the middle of the trail and turned, shining our flashlights back the way we'd come. The beams cut sharp through the dark, picking out trunks and ferns and nothing else. No people, no movement, no glint of metal or reflective gear. The orbs were gone. We stood there a long minute, breathing slow, listening. Only the wind high in the pines and our own heartbeats. Sarah laughed nervously. Guess they turned off their lights. We turned back around and kept going, but the quiet felt different now, thicker, watching. We hadn't walked more than 50 yards when the lights reappeared in the corner of my eye. Same distance, same gentle bob, same pale glow. This time they were closer to the trail edge, weaving slightly between trunks, as if whatever carried them was stepping carefully around roots. I stopped again. So did they. Sarah gripped my hand tighter. "They're matching us," she whispered. I nodded, throat dry. We took a few slow steps forward. The lights followed. We stopped. They stopped.
The rhythm was perfect, unnerving, like a shadow that refused to be shaken. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both knew we needed to get back to the car. We turned and started walking faster, not running yet, just a brisk pace that ate up ground. The orbs matched us without effort, floating steady behind. No sound of footsteps, no rustle of leaves, just that silent, persistent glow. The trail seemed longer on the return, every bend stretching out, every rise steeper. Moonlight slanted through the trees in long bars, but the shadows between them felt deeper, more solid. I kept glancing back, hoping to catch a glimpse of a person. A backpack, a hat, anything human. Nothing. Just the lights, patient and exact. Panic came on slow but deep. My pulse was loud in my ears, breath short. Sarah's hand was cold in mine. We started jogging, then running in bursts. 20 yards fast, then walking to catch our breath, then running again. The lights never wavered. They didn't speed up when we did. They didn't slow when we slowed. They simply kept the same interval, like they were tethered to us by invisible line. Once I spun around mid-stride, flashlight beam whipping wide, shouting, "Hey," into the dark. The orbs winked out instantly. Silence. Then as soon as we turned back to the trail, they reappeared. Same place, same distance, as if they'd never left. The car felt miles away. Sweat soaked my shirt despite the cool night air. Branches snagged at my sleeves, roots got my boots. Sarah was breathing hard beside me, eyes wide. We didn't talk. Words would have made it realer. The trail finally dropped towards the road, and we broke into a full run, legs burning, lungs aching, gravel crunching underfoot as we hit the parking area. The truck loomed ahead, dark and solid. We yanked the doors open, scrambled inside, slammed them shut, locked them. For a long moment we just sat there, chest heaving, staring out the windshield at the trailhead. The lights were still there. They hovered at the very edge of the trees, where the forest met the gravel, pale orbs floating maybe 3 feet off the ground. No movement, no bobbing now, just steady, watching. One by one they began to wink out, slow and deliberate, like someone blowing out candles. First the leftmost, then the center, then the right. When the last one vanished, the dark rushed in complete. I fumbled the keys into the ignition, started the engine, headlights flooding the trailhead. Nothing moved. I backed out fast, tires spitting gravel, and we peeled down the forest road without speaking. We didn't stop until we reached the highway, then pulled into a gas station lot with bright sodium lights and the hum of a vending machine. We sat there 10 minutes, engine running, doors locked, before either of us could talk. Sarah's hands shook when she reached for the water bottle. I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting those pale glows to appear behind us on the road. They never did. We drove straight home that night, 4 hours of white line fever and silence broken only by the occasional, "What the hell was that?" Neither of us had an answer. I looked up will-o'-the-wisps later, marsh gas, methane igniting over wetlands, but the trail was high and dry, no bog anywhere near. Some locals online mentioned ghost lights in the Alleghenies, old miner lanterns or lost souls from lumber camps, but those stories always sounded half made up, campfire tales. What we saw wasn't folklore. It was patient, it was aware. It matched us step for step, and waited until we were safely inside metal and glass before it let us go. We haven't been back to those woods after dark. We still camp, still hike, but never alone and never past sunset. Sometimes driving through Pennsylvania at night, I'll catch a flicker in the rear view. Headlights on a distant curve maybe, or my own imagination, and my stomach drops. Sarah still wakes sometimes, sits straight up, and whispers that she heard footsteps pacing outside the bedroom window. I tell her it's the neighbor's dog, the wind, anything. But we both know better. The forest keeps its secrets, and some nights when the moon is full and the quiet presses in too close, I wonder if those lights are still out there, drifting low between the pines, waiting for the next pair of people who think they're alone, waiting to follow, waiting to match every step until the runner tires, until the car door slams, until the last pale glow winks out and leaves only the dark, and the question of what would have happened if we'd stopped running and turned to meet them halfway.
It was the weekend after Thanksgiving 2019, and we decided to take the kids up to the George Washington National Forest in Virginia for a little getaway before the Christmas rush swallowed us whole. Me, my wife Laura, our daughter Ellie, who was 10 going on 16, and our boy Mason, 7 and full of energy that never seemed to run out. We'd rented a small cabin outside Staunton, nothing fancy, just a place with a wood stove and no cell service so we could actually talk to each other for once. The forecast called for a dusting of snow overnight, the kind that makes everything look brand new, and we figured a day hike on Saturday would be perfect. Fresh air, pretty views, memories to carry us through the winter. We woke to maybe 3 inches on the ground, light and dry, sparkling under the weak morning sun. The kids were beside themselves, bundling up in their coats and hats, begging to go before the plows messed it all up. We picked a trailhead off Forest Road 162, one the ranger at the cabin office had recommended, Ramsey's Draft Trail, Supposed to be an easy out and back along the stream, 4 miles round trip, good for families. The parking area was empty when we pulled in, just a little gravel lot with a wooden kiosk and a trail sign half covered in snow. Our tires were the first to mark the fresh powder. We laced up our boots, packed snacks and water, made sure everyone had gloves, and set off. The snow muffled everything right from the start. Our footsteps made soft crunching sounds, but beyond that, the woods were silent. No wind, no birds, no distant highway hum. Just white blanketing the pines and hardwoods, branches bowing low under the weight. Ellie and Mason ran ahead, leaving little boot prints that zigzagged across the trail, laughing as they tried to catch snowflakes on their tongues. Laura walked beside me, her arm looped through mine, breath fogging in the cold. We talked about nothing important, whether we'd make hot chocolate when we got back, if the cabin's fireplace drew good, how Mason's teacher had said he was reading 2 grades ahead. It felt good, normal, the kind of day you hold on to when life gets hard later. We hiked out maybe 2 miles, stopping now and then to look at animal tracks crossing the path. Deer, rabbit, something small like a fox. The stream ran alongside us most of the way, half frozen at the edges, gurgling soft under shelves of ice. The kids threw snowballs at trees, faces red from cold and happiness. Around midday, we found a wide spot where the trail opened up, sat on a fallen log to eat peanut butter sandwiches and drink thermos cocoa. Snow started falling again, big lazy flakes drifting straight down in the still air. Nobody else on the trail the whole time, just us and the quiet. On the way back, the kids were tiring out, walking slower, staying closer. That's when I noticed the prints. They branched off the main trail to our left, heading straight into a thick stand of mountain laurel and young hemlock. Bare feet, clear as anything, 5 toes, high arch, deep impressions like whoever made them was heavy or running. The snow was undisturbed around them, no scuffs, no drag marks, just a single line of prints starting abrupt right at the edge of our packed trail, as if someone had stepped off sideways and kept going. I stopped first. Laura bumped into me, then saw what I was looking at. "What in the world?" she whispered. The kids crowded close, Ellie asking if it was Bigfoot, Mason wide-eyed and quiet for once. I told them it was probably just somebody who lost their boots, maybe hurt and needing help. Truth was, my stomach had already knotted up. Bare feet in this cold. 3 inches of snow and temperatures barely above 20? Hypothermia sets in fast. We called out, "Hello? You okay out there?" Voices falling flat in the muffled woods. Nothing answered. I followed the tracks a little way off the trail, maybe 20 yards, pushing through laurel that snatched at my coat. The prints went straight. No weaving, no hesitation, deep enough that the person had to be adult-sized. Snow filled in slightly at the edges, meaning they were fresh, made after we'd passed heading out, while we were eating lunch. I kept going, concern overriding sense. Laura called after me to be careful, voice tight. The kids stayed on the trail with her. The tracks continued another 80 yards or so, still arrow straight, heading deeper into brush too thick for easy travel. Branches were unbroken overhead, no sign anyone had climbed. Then just like that, they stopped. Not tapered off, not turned, stopped. The last print was full weight, heel deep, toes clear, and then nothing. No return prints, no disturbance in the snow around it, no kneeling, no sitting, no scramble up a tree, just blank powder stretching out in every direction, smooth as it had fallen. I stood there a long minute, breath coming fast, staring at that final impression. Called again, louder this time, voice cracking on the second shout. Only echo came back, dull and short. I walked circles around the spot, wider and wider, looking for any sign. Broken twig, depressed snow where someone might have lain down, anything. Found nothing. The woods pressed close, laurel thick enough to hide a body 10 feet away, but the snow told the story plain. Whoever made those tracks had reached that point and simply ceased to exist. I backed out slow, brushing snow from my pants, trying to keep my face calm for the kids. Laura saw it in my eyes anyway. She gathered Ellie and Mason close, told them we needed to head back to the car now. The walk out felt longer than the hike in. Kids were quiet, holding our hands tight. Snow kept falling, already softening our boot prints from earlier. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone step out from the trees, barefoot and blue-lipped, needing help we hadn't given fast enough. We reached the parking lot as dusk started settling gray through the flakes. Our van was the only vehicle, tire tracks already half filled. Drove straight to the ranger station in Deerfield, reported what we'd seen. The ranger on duty, older fellow with a gray mustache, listened polite, took notes, said he'd send someone to check in the morning. No missing persons reports, no calls about lost hikers. Told us sometimes folks take shortcuts cross-country, maybe came out on a forest road we didn't know about. I nodded like that made sense, but we both knew it didn't. Not with prints starting and ending in the middle of nowhere. That night back at the cabin, we built the fire high, made the hot chocolate we promised, put on a movie for the kids.
Ellie fell asleep on the couch halfway through. Mace have called against Laura asking if the barefoot man was okay. We told him yes, that the Rangers would find him. But sleep didn't come easy for me or Laura. We lay awake listening to the wind pick up outside, snow tapping the windows like fingernails. I've driven past that trail a few times since, always in summer now, always with other cars in the lot, never stopped again. Some nights when it snows back home, I'll wake up sudden, heart racing, picturing that last sprint in the powder, perfect, solitary, leading nowhere. Wondering if whoever made it is still out there somewhere, walking on bare feet through endless white, or if the forest just decided it wanted something that day and took it quiet, without a struggle. And every time the kids ask to go hiking in fresh snow, I find a reason we can't. Because I know what the Rangers won't say out loud. Some tracks aren't meant to be followed, and some endings leave no trace at all.